So it's funny because I was having this conversation with my coworker at work today. A white guy, very logically thinking kind of dude, not open to the belief in God and stuff like that. So he walks up to me while I'm, doing the dishes at work, and he's just, so what makes God really, an all good God? And I'm like, well, whoever said that God was all good? And he's like, oh, so you don't believe he is all good? I'm like, no, the Bible doesn't even support that he's all good. And I followed up with saying, God even stated in the Bible, I can't remember the exact verse, but I'm sure one of you can post it in the comments. But I was like, God has literally said, I make good and I create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things, right? And then, I went on to say, like, for example, right, he can't be all good, because if that was the case, he would just instantly forgive even the rapist. And although I don't believe in the exact concept that Christians believe, but I just was following his line of logic a little bit, and I was like, well, imagine God sending the rapist who raped like 100 people, sent him to heaven, where there's nothing but all good people there. Then that rapist would just rape everybody who's there in heaven. And, we kind of laughed about it or whatever, because that person would just rape everybody. Then we got back to the serious topic, like, would that make him all good? Would that actually be bad? Sorry, I got a call. But so that I made the argument, then that would mean that he's actually not just, because he didn't make a just judgment. And, I started using, like, courtroom as examples. And, he started to kind of use a little bit of semantics and just say things like, well, by whose morality are we basing it off of, if I were to use the judge analogy? I'm like, well, if we're going based off of the laws and, that our American society is based off of, that's what dictates the justice in the court system or in the courtroom. And so, relating that back with God, we have his laws that he created, and he goes, well, what makes his laws just or moral? And I was like, well, because we understand that there are the laws of the universe, right? And they all correspond with one another, which equates to the consistency of the universe constantly going forever and ever. And the laws in the Bible are how we should live to coincide with those laws of the universe, right? You even have the dietary law, and then I even, based on the things that you should and shouldn't eat to keep a good health and live a lot longer, right? And we started going into little judgments, stuff like that. So I use the example, well, because he was like, well, why should I follow them if I'm just going to go to hell? If I don't do them. That doesn't sound like somebody I want to follow. I'm like, well, it's not exactly like that. It's not that he's going to just send you to hell just for, you know what I mean? Like, ultimately, you can argue that is what it, kind of is alluding to. But I gave him an example. I was like, for example, if you eat pork, which we know the Bible condemns, and I can't remember, so I'm just going to paraphrase the verse. It talks about if you eat the pig, the rat, in the midst behind one tree, something like that, you will be consumed together with the fire. And he was like, well, that's basically hell. I'm like, no, who said it is? Because we're talking about dietary law, and there's a cause and effect to everything. God, gave us quote unquote free will. So by that metric, it's a cause and effect thing. You eat something, there's things that happen, especially when you overconsume things, even if it's not against the law. If it, falls into gluttony, there is an effect that happened because of the cause. The cause being you put something in your mouth that you probably shouldn't have, and the effect would be, for example, gout. Eating, pork, and on top of that, say it's gluttonous to do so. Now you have gout in your foot. And then I asked him, well, what does gout feel like? And he laughed because he understood what I was saying. He was like, ha 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 ha, it's a burning sensation. And I'm like, that's what it's referring to when it's talking about being consumed with the fire. Eating these things that are not actually conducive to your health. So I gave him a little bit of understanding on the topic, but then, we just kept going on into it, and it just was an interesting topic. But the biggest part that I wanted to share was he asked me a question like, I can't remember exactly how he posed the question, but I gave him another example, right? Like, I know you don't believe in God, you know, especially from the religious perspective. I was like, well, you know, we have to understand that God is basically ultimate consciousness. And so I was like, well, think about it like this, right? The Hebrew definition for God is El or Allah, depending on how you want to say it, right? And then you go into the Elohim, which is the plural version of the word for God. But what makes it interesting is the fact that that isn't the only definition for the English translation of the word Elohim or Allah, right? Or El. One of the other definitions, which is a highly known one, is actually power. So even if you don't look at it from a perspective of, oh, he's some being in the sky, right? We're talking about God being in terms of energy. God is a power. That means he's an energy source, and he is the source of energy, right? And so, you know, we just kind of went on, and he was like, I didn't think about that. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, also, like, even when you look at it from a scientific perspective, because this is how I tied it into it, it's like, right, like, this is why I said that science and religion have to go hand in hand, because ultimately God created everything. So I'm like, look at, everything is hidden in etymology of words, because words in ancient times were based off of sound, right, which is why they're considered light languages, because light and sound are basically very much the same, if not similar, right? You take a sound and you increase the frequency of it, it eventually becomes light, right? Which is why you can perceive light with your eyes and perceive sound with your ears, right? Because they're just tuned in different frequencies, right? Same, but different, I guess you could say, right? And so in this case, when you are saying, right, I lost my train of thought for a second. So when you're saying that, when I'm saying science and religion have to, you know, go hand in hand, you know, using etymology of words and stuff like that, you have Adam and Atom. Adam is a man, and people are an accumulation of atoms, right? And not only that, much like in atom, you need electromagnetic radiation to really excite that particle so that way it can, you know, be excited, be alive, so to speak, activated. And much the same way an atom needs electromagnetic radiation, Adam, or a man, needs the Holy Spirit to be excited and or alive. Which, when you look at it, even scripturally, it'll say that the Holy Spirit is what causes all life to persist. The same way electromagnetic radiation is needed for an atom to persist. You see what I mean? Like, the correlations are literally there. I have so many other examples that I use to, you know, explain that, but that was just what I said to him. And it made him, like, kind of, you know, stop in his tracks and actually think for a second. And instead of, like, just refuting the things that I'm saying, for once he was actually able to go, actually that makes sense. You know, and then he prescribed to me a book that I should read, you know, kind of getting into not so much religious beliefs, but like fantasy books and stuff like that. I can't remember the name of the author or even the book. I'll probably ask him again tomorrow. But, you know, we just kind of went on. I don't know, it was just a little story time I wanted to tell you guys. Hope you learned something from what I've said this night, and you guys have a great one. How about you shot, bro?